Hi everybody, I'm Phil Fatica and welcome to the Millcreek Government Channel. This is Channel 9. Very special program for you today with a very special woman named Therese Vorshek. She is with The Caring Place. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks
Tell me
for
about The
having
Caring Place. What is it? And tell me about the pin you're wearing, because I think that has a great deal to do with where it is you work.
It absolutely does. And the Highmark Caring Place is a center for grieving children, adolescents, and their families. And we provide peer support groups and a variety of services for children after the death of a loved one. And our main mission is to bring children together with other children and families who have had somebody die so that they can share the experience of healing together.
Where are you located?
We are located, actually, we have 4 facilities in Pennsylvania. Our facility here in Erie is located right off the bayfront on Cranberry Street.
Okay.
510 Cranberry Street.
And that's, I think, somewhat unique. People perhaps may have thought you were only indigenous to Erie, but you're scattered throughout the Commonwealth.
We are.
And your pin is a symbol of?
Actually, this is our logo, and it's a broken heart with a butterfly coming out of it. And it was actually drawn during one of our group sessions, one of our first group sessions almost 15 years ago, by one of the children that came to our program. And during the program, he drew a picture of a broken heart and told the volunteer who was working with him that when his brother died, his heart was broken. And after coming to the sessions for a while, he went back to the same photo and he added a butterfly to it and said,
that's great.
After having come to the program, he felt like there was some hope that it wasn't always going to hurt so bad. So that really underscores a lot of what we do with the children. You can't heal the broken heart when somebody dies, but you can hopefully give the kids some hope that it won't always hurt so bad.
We're going to remind people a lot through this. Do you have a phone number, a website perhaps that people can go and say, this is what I need to do and this is how I can contact them?
Yes, the best way to contact us is through our website, and that's highmarkcaringplace.com.
Highmarkcaringplace,
all one word,
.com. Okay, and that was it. What gave rise to these? Why? Because they weren't always around.
That's correct.
And so, why weren't they always around, and what gave rise to them?
Well, you're absolutely right. There was, for many, many years, and still exists today, a lot of myths that surround the grieving process of children. And many years ago, before the Caring Place and even prior to that, it wasn't even believed that children really went through a prolonged grief process. You might hear people often say, and again still say today, that children are very resilient. They bounce back very quickly. And you may even witness some of that in that you may see a child who, let's say a 6-year-old whose father just died, has just come back from the funeral, and they're at home and may have been crying at the funeral, and now they're outside playing baseball with their friends. And it was mistakenly believed that that type of behavior was indicative of the children bouncing back very quickly. However, we have come to understand over time that that's not what it means at all, and that it's actually that children just grieve differently than adults.
So, what goes on what goes on in your building? What happens? Is there therapy session? Are there therapy sessions, or do you have them go other places, or do you interview them and see where perhaps the best medicine, quote unquote, is for this particular individual? Is it individually structured? I mean, everybody, as you said, reacts differently to this and could react for longer periods of time. So let's use Phil. Phil's 10, and Phil just lost his dad. So what happens? What
happens is your guardian, mother, father, grandparent, whoever might be taking care of you, would call the Caring Place, and we would do an assessment to make sure that we are the appropriate program for Phil and for your family.
Let me brag on you a little bit, because Therese is you registered, is it?
Licensed.
Licensed psychologist. Yeah, so you have experience in dealing with these kinds of issues. So, okay, so you call, You
call the Caring Place, and we do an assessment to make sure that we are the appropriate program for your family, because we don't provide, you ask what type of therapy we provide. It's not a therapy program. We're not providing therapy. We're providing peer support, which is different than therapy.
Sure.
It's the opportunity for children to come together with other children and grieving adults, because the whole family comes to come together with other adults who have had a similar experience to share with one another.
In your building.
In our building. So
in
it's
a
all facility
structured
based.
setting that says you have an appointment at 2
It's
on
all
Thursday?
Right. It's all done in group sessions that are held in the evening from 6 to 8 o'clock in the evening.
Okay.
So basically you, Phil, and your family would be assigned to a group. And for example, you may be assigned to the Wednesday night group, and you would come to the Caring Place facility every other Wednesday night from 6 to 8 o'clock in the evening, and you would meet with many other grieving families who have had somebody die in their life. And you would have the opportunity to meet with everybody for the first hour, and we have dinner. And it's a community time for everybody who comes, and there would probably be anywhere from 60 to 100 people in the building at one time.
Wow.
Between family members and volunteers
Sure.
who help facilitate the sessions.
How do you volunteer? We have a large viewing audience. Somehow these would have to be very specialized volunteers, I would think. Wouldn't they have to be sort of, not screened, but interviewed to say, are you qualified to do this? I mean, do you bring any credentials with you to understand the process? Do you do that?
Actually, you do not have to have any credentials except for an interest in helping children, a compassionate ear.
Sure.
We do provide training.
Okay.
We provide a 26-hour training program that the staff at the Caring Place does with new volunteers, and so you do have to complete that training, and then we provide ongoing trainings throughout the year. But you don't. A lot of people do think you have to have a background in some psychology or social work to be a volunteer, and you do not. We provide you with the training, and then we provide oversight from there, and you get the opportunity to work hands-on with the kids in the rooms and facilitate different types of activities with the children and the adults that come.
Is any part of the broad religious community associated with your work? I mean, what if the child says, I need to see the rabbi, or I'd really wish if the priest were here, or the minister were here?
Well, that would be something that we wouldn't provide, but we would make sure we would help facilitate that process with the family if that was needed, but that's not part and parcel of our program. But whatever the needs are of the children and the family, and however we can be helpful in having those needs be met, we would do that.
Is the school alerted, or is this still very confidential? It says Phil is going to class to deal with the grieving process of his father dying. Are the schools alerted that this child is perhaps be a little tender because this individual has gone through a traumatic experience that maybe breaks the natural order of life?
Sure.
You know.
We do not,
especially if a younger sibling has died, something of that nature, you know, where that's not supposed to happen.
You reference confidentiality, and because of that, we do not tell the schools that the families are coming. We would encourage the adults the parents or the guardians to tell the schools, so that exactly what you're saying, so the school was alerted that this has happened to the family. Oftentimes, Phil, it's actually the schools who know first and who are referring the families to us. The schools are oftentimes a kind of a first line of reference for these types of things, because the kids are coming in, or they're missing school for the days of the funeral, or they find out. So they're often the ones referring the families to us.
And we're talking a lot about Phil being 10 years old, but let's say Phil's 40. Can Phil, being 40, come there?
If our program it's focused on children, but it is a family program, and so if you had a child that you were kind of coming with, so it has to be at least one adult and one child that attend the program together. If you were an adult alone, then we would refer you to there's other grief services in the community that we could refer you to.
Is there a period of time that most people, you can see some improvement, you can see that the person is getting better, stronger? I don't know what word is comfortable in your vocabulary. And here's the tough question. This is why they pay me the huge dollars here. Who pays for this? Where's the money come from? Because if you and I were if I was grieving with you, it would be expensive. And that's a process. It requires very specialized training and counseling. So, first part is there a time frame that, and then secondly, how is this handled financially?
Each of the sessions that we talked about, for example, if you were in the Wednesday night group, going with that example, you would come for 10 meetings. And the sessions are closed sessions, which means that once they start, the same group of families, same group of volunteers go through together for 10 times. You can come back for as many sessions as you need to as a family. And it's all of our services are provided at no cost to the family. We provide meals, and everything that we provide is offered.
Say that again very loudly, because we make sure that people, this is no cost.
It's everything that we provide for grieving families in the community is offered at no cost.
Wonderful. That is really incredible. What turned the tide from people saying, he'll be okay in a couple of days, you know, it's all right. He's a tough kid, she's a tough girl, let her go to her room, cry, come out, she'll be okay. Was there any seminal moments where people started saying that, as you said earlier, they're really not as resilient as you think they are when it comes to this kind of trauma in their life? Is there anybody identify this, whether studies done in colleges, universities, people looking for their doctorates and saying, wow, we're really, really on the wrong path on this one completely?
Absolutely. Just like
3-hour question.
It is, but it can be answered simply. I think over time, just like any other mental health or psychological or even medical issue, it's been studied over time, and so over time there's been research that has amassed that has pointed to some facts about children and grief, and therefore some treatment modalities that are effective. I think, in my opinion, what really brought to light the grief of children and the impact of death on children was actually what happened on 9/11. I think that was such a national tragedy, and it impacted all at one time so many children and so many families that brought all the research that had been done up to that date into light. And since that time, it's become more of an understandable issue.
You mentioned that, and to me, a dovetail would be the wars that we have been involved in, that the children don't see their father or mother come back. This is not perhaps even an instance where they can see the body as a final closure in some instances. Is that impacted the way we respond to children's needs? I mean, they don't vote, so they don't have a whole lot of power here.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And absolutely the deaths that happen connected with the military, although grieving is a universal reaction to death. The circumstances that surround the death make each death unique. And whether it's a homicide, a suicide, a death connected with the military, there's instances within all of those circumstances that make them unique in their grief process. And as you said, not being able to see the body can absolutely impact and interrupt that grieving process.
I know, for example, that I believe I got this correct me if I'm wrong, during, say, Vietnam, where people I knew fought and died, the bodies were put in a bag and sort of brought home, and you had a record of that. And they kind of grew from that into the Iraq invasions and whatever. They weren't showing the bodies coming anymore, arriving in Dover, Delaware in the caskets. They said, no, that reminds people too much of a very bad situation that we're involved in. Was that good, bad, or just the way it was? That was generated by the military to say, no, we don't need to remind people that people are dying over there. Whereas the Vietnam War, you watched the nightly news, you saw people dying.
Sure.
They've changed the public relations of that. Because of that, and this is a long-winded question again, the media today plays into so many of these young kids' lives, especially the graphic, violent games that they play, where you can turn the game off and you're okay. Is there anything that plays into the bravado that I'm tough and I can shoot you? And I mean, is there any grieving for that, or how does that all come together with these young kids that you deal with today? I mean, they're bombarded with all of these external forces.
There's no doubt about that. Media is having a tremendous impact on the lives of our children in many, many different ways. And the video games and in just how death is depicted in the media, although it's honestly not one of my areas of expertise, so I can only speak to it in general.
A lot of studies written on that.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. But I can only speak to it in general, that it does impact how kids view death and how they view the permanency of death, in that it's easy to get lulled into what happens on a video game, which is you shoot somebody and they get up and, you know, the character is there again. And so it's almost too easy to get lulled into not fully understanding that you take a real gun and you shoot somebody and they're not coming back.
Are we desensitizing them, do you think, to the point where that's occurring, and then when it really occurs, they have no concept, no tools with which to deal with this whatsoever? Again,
not my area of expertise, but yes, that's my understanding, that what the research is showing is that kids are being desensitized to that type of violence.
Okay. Again, this is Therese Voracek, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. She's from the Caring Place, and it's a place where, well, you tell them, what do you do there?
We provide peer support services for grieving children and families after the death of a family member.
How far children do you take them up to? What do you define the end of the children?
Up to high school graduation.
High school graduation? I would think that there are people beyond 18 that still need that counseling. Absolutely. Is that available someplace at the Caring Place?
Well, we try. What makes it difficult is that after high school graduation, so many will go away to college. And so to have, it absolutely is a gap in services to serve that age population. But if we have enough young adults to form a group, we will absolutely provide that. Oftentimes there really isn't the volume to put together a group of young adults. If there is, then we'll address it.
Without the need for this counseling at the Caring Place, what would manifest itself, let's say, if untreated? Like you said, fathers died, let's say, perhaps very violently, and then the young child is out playing baseball 3 hours later, and aunts and uncles are going, see, yeah, he'll be okay. Is there a long way down the road that manifests itself in in his or her behavior negatively, positively?
Let's draw a line, a definition between two different types of things here. You have more of what I'll call a normal type of grieving process after a death, and then you have a death that has had some type of trauma attached to it. Okay, so similarities among the two, but then also very different. And as we talked about before, when a family would call to come to the Caring Place, part of what we're trying to assess is whether there has been a trauma component to that death, because if so, then if it has involved a murder or somebody has witnessed the murder, or you know, some very tragic things a child may find their father who committed suicide. There's a trauma component to that really needs to be addressed in therapy, in counseling, prior to, or maybe just even prior to coming to the Caring Place, or solely in and of itself. But that absolutely needs to be addressed in a counseling situation. Yeah, yeah. And I would imagine years ago that if you just couldn't get over that, you were branded as weak and what's the matter with you, and it's okay, though today for boys to cry and to express grief, nothing wrong with that. It's absolutely nothing wrong with that, and we're hoping that certainly... And girls to express grief too. Right, exactly, and to, part of our larger mission is to educate the community, which is why I'm happy to be here today. Wonderful having you. And this again is Therese Voracek. She's from the Caring Place. Just get your plugs in there. I appreciate that. Go to the website, Caring Place. Highmarkcaringplace.com. Highmarkcaringplace.com. One word, all one word. But part of our larger mission is to continually educate the community about the needs of grieving children, and to help them understand that grief is not a finite process, that for a child, grief is a lifelong process. And if a child loses, let's say Phil, who's 10, and his dad dies when you're 10, you understand that death differently at 10 than you will at 16. And there'll be different developmental triggers that can bring that death back around to you. So you might go a period of a couple of years where you're fine, and then all of a sudden you hit high school graduation and dad's not there,
Not there.
And that absence can bring it back. And so as you go through life, different things can bring it back to greater and lesser extents. So it really, it used to be believed years ago that the grieving process was a 2-year process, and at the end of that 2 years,
you're good to go.
Good to go.
Yeah,
yeah.
Sure.
And
All scrubbed up, ready.
Exactly, and it certainly is now more understood that it's a lifelong process.
I think then I want to extend that beyond our borders and go to these young children who are growing up in countries where they've known nothing but violent war and death, and how that's going to impact them in 20 years if their country continues to be that way.
Sure.
Or the natural disasters that occur where they see their parents die in front of them. I would assume that they have some kind of counseling that takes place there, because I would assume that people from the United States go as grief counselors, but that's a Band-Aid.
It often is, and those types of disasters and those types of ongoing trauma are just, they're devastating to the person and to their psyche, and it's the impact is really unimaginable.
Maybe a difficult question here, but my intent of asking that was that these people then see the people who perpetrated their parents' death as being very wrong and evil in their eyes, and they should be punished for causing this. Would that be a possibility, to see that? Revenge is a motive.
To see revenge? I'm sorry, I'm not understanding.
Well, if you take the larger world and you see these people who are being killed by outside forces, and they've lived with this for years, and there's really no chance to grieve or understand, only to revenge the death. And it just seems that it just keeps going on and on, it doesn't stop. What you do is put a end cap on the fact of, and you encourage the understanding of what would have happened. A traumatic death, though, where somebody perhaps who murdered the father is now imprisoned. Do they ever come to say, "I forgive you"?
Well, it's a very personal process.
Yes, yeah. I'm glad you said that. It's a very personal process.
It's a very personal process, and it's a very individual process that really takes in the complexity of who we are as human beings, and again, our psyche and whatever your spirituality might be, and those types of, again, traumatic-based death situations is not what we're addressing at the caring place. It's more kind of the natural grieving process that children and families go through. Again, with the trauma piece, it really needs to be addressed in a counseling environment.
Again, this is Therese Vorschuk. She is from the Caring Place. We're talking about the death of a loved one and the grieving process that takes place. Interesting, I've been blessed. My father passed away when he was 90. My mother passed away when she was 96 plus. I'm an only child. But because of that longevity, of course I grieved and cried, but maybe a lot differently if they had died when they were like 40, and I couldn't quite understand why did that happen? How come that happened so soon to the people who fed me and clothed me and put the roof over my head,
Exactly.
So anything we didn't touch on here, because we have a few minutes left, you got the ball, run with it.
Sure, I would love to talk, if I could, briefly about an initiative that the Highmark Caring Place started 4 years ago called Children's Grief Awareness Day. And as I talked earlier, part of our larger mission is to continue to raise awareness of the impact of death on children and the needs of grieving children, and that's what Children's Grief Awareness Day is set out to do. It's a national day of observance to show support for grieving children, and it's coming up very soon. It's the third Thursday in November, and so this year it will be November 17th.
Okay, well, we're not too specific here because you're going to get a long life in this show, so they may miss it, but just let them know that you are ongoing events to bring awareness to this would be better said. Once again, you're wearing that great pin, and the pin is?
That is our logo, and it is showing that when somebody dies in our life, our heart is broken, but hopefully a program like the Caring Place, which is what the butterfly symbolizes, is a symbol of hope. We can help you bring hope back into your life that won't always hurt so badly.
You're doing good stuff. Keep it up.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for
Appreciate your expertise. Thank you for being with us. I'm Phil Fatika. Again, this is Therese Vorschuk. She's from the Caring Place. You can find them on the web at
highmarkcaringplace.com.
Okay. Until next time, take care.